Hello, this is Robert Perkins, the Immigration Professor. Today we're going to talk a little bit about one of the most common defenses to being deported or removed, which is asylum. You can see all of my videos at my website, www.immigration-professor.com. Also, you can contact my office. The law offices of Robert Perkins. We have offices in Chicago as well as Los Angeles and Aurora, Illinois. The number is 310-384-0200. We talked a little bit in the first two videos about, the first video about what is the process of being deported or removed, what are the appeals, what are your rights, and we learned that it's not a process that happens overnight, it's a process by which you have the right to present a case. In the second part of our videos, we talked a little bit about a common defense to being deported called cancellation of removal for people that have been here for 10 years. So now we're going to talk a little bit about asylum. And basically, the law of the United States is a generous law, and we allow people to stay here that have been fleeing persecution. And as defense to being deported, you can claim asylum. You have to show, first of all, that you have a well-founded fear of persecution to get asylum. All right, what does that mean? What does a well-founded fear mean? Well, the first part is in your head, kind of subjectively in your head. Are you actually afraid of being persecuted? Is there a good reason that someone would be afraid in your circumstances? Were you threatened with some kind of persecution by the government or by a military group or whatever is the unstable part of your country? And the second part of a well-founded fear is an objective fear, meaning is your fear reasonable? Given what we know about the country that you are from, is your fear reasonable? For example, if you are claiming fear of political persecution and you're coming from England, where there's relative political freedom, is your fear, reasonable? Probably might not be. So the first part is a well-founded fear of being persecuted. The fear has to be because of, or what we call on account of, is what the law says, race, religion, nationality, which is where you're from or where you're born, membership in a social group or a particular social group, or political opinion. So let's say, for example, you're from a country and somebody's persecuting you because they don't like you. As a person, that's not the type of persecution that the United States finds to be abhorrent. What we find to be abhorrent is if somebody's persecuted because of their race, religion, nationality, membership in a social group, and I'll touch a little bit about what that means, or their political opinion. So it has to be because of those things that they are persecuted. And the fear of persecution has to be a bit particularized to the person. It can't be just that you're generally afraid. What the Supreme Court has said is that there has to be basically a 1 in 10 chance that you would be persecuted, and then your fear would be reasonable and well-founded. The other thing that the law says is you can't claim asylum just because conditions in the country are bad generally. If there's a civil war or something like that and you're fleeing and you might get killed or something else because people are killing each other, that's not enough for asylum. You have to show something particular about you or your group of people that you belong to that would justify a fear. So it has to be because of all of these things. So again, this is a defense to being deported or removed, and my videos are all found on my website, www.immigration-professor.com, or if you have questions about a particular case, you can call our office at 310-384-0200. So as I said, with asylum, One of the requirements for asylum is that you have to claim asylum within 1 year of coming into the United States. However, even if you don't, there's other remedies that are very similar to asylum. One called withholding of removal that's fairly similar that you can claim based on persecution. So let's go over a little bit about why some of these on account of factors. So race is one. For example, if you're part of a particular race and that race is being persecuted and perhaps you personally have received some threats, that would be a ground for asylum. Religion. There's religious persecution in different parts of the world. Certain religions are persecuted. If you could show that your religion is persecuted generally, again, you have to show that there's a reasonableness to your fear, that there's materials, newspaper articles, and other sources that show, yes, indeed, there's this type of religious persecution in your country. And that you in particular have a fear. In other words, let's say you've received threats or even actual persecution, then that would be a ground for asylum. Nationality is another one that's fairly obvious. Social group is a really interesting one. Recent cases have talked about gender, for example, as being possibly a social group and a basis for asylum. Persecution on account of sexual orientation, too, has fallen under the social group part of asylum. So that's another part of this. And the last part of it is political opinion. And the law has been pretty broad on political opinion. For example, I once had a case of a lady from a former communist country that was persecuted because she refused to join the Communist Party. She herself didn't have a political opinion, but what happened is under communism is they imputed a political opinion to her. Her persecutors did, that she was anti-communist, even when it really was that she was neutral. And that served as a basis for asylum. Now, the immigration courts have become increasingly strict with what types of evidence will support asylum. Obviously, one piece of evidence is the testimony of who is applying for asylum. But the courts these days also want to see affidavits from other people who may have witnessed some part of the persecution. Any kind of documentation, if someone was put in jail, if someone went to the hospital or was beaten up as part of the persecution, those things are also helpful to the court in proving an asylum claim. Expert testimony has become increasingly used in asylum cases. Both psychologists who testify about post-traumatic stress for people that have suffered persecution, as well as just experts about the particular country involved. One example being, for example, perhaps a history professor or a political science professor that specializes in that part of the world. So those are the types of evidence that you want to present in an asylum case. And one of the things I think is really important, I urge people to take these cases seriously, especially in immigration court when you're going to a trial. You really need to treat it as a trial, try to see who can be a witness, and try to be creative. You might be able to get testimony by telephone, testimony by affidavits, and other things to support your case. Again, you can see all our videos at immigration-professor.com, or if you have questions about your case, please call our offices at 310-384-0200.